Awesome. So, hi everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to the second session in Dalgo's webinar series about the data lifecycle. We did one of these sessions back in February where we talked about the different stages of the nonprofit data journey and how it all leads us to the eventual goal of data for effective decision making. This time, we're doing things a little differently. It's going to be focused a lot more on where AI plays a role across those different stages. So if you've been part of the February session, you might see some new things. And if you haven't attended the last session, that's fine too, because we're going to start with a recap. A lot of you are new in the room, might not have heard of us. So just a quick introduction. I'm Stuti. I look at product awareness and data education at Dalgo. And I have with me Anusha, who leads the consulting practice at Dalgo. Really, as a product or an initiative, our mission is that we believe that every nonprofit can create greater impact when data is an effective part of their decision making. And we have different pathways through which we help organizations enable that. We have the consulting practice where our consultants work closely with nonprofit partners across different problem statements from implementation to data strategy. And of course, we have the Dalgo platform that some of you might have heard of, which is a data integration and reporting platform that is specifically built for the social sector use cases. But today, this is not as much about Dalgo, it's about data and AI. So let's zoom out. Let's start with a quick story. Meet Meera. Meera is an M&E lead. She runs an education NGO. She has a team of 40 field staff where she has data running across three districts and running back 4 years. She, like all of us, is looking to wrap up her day on a Thursday afternoon, and suddenly she gets an email. It's 4 p.m., and a funder report is due. The funder is asking for the numbers on the latest program. Now, the data is very much present. The problem is that it's present across different sources. Her team uses different tools such as Survey CTO, Kobo Toolbox, Excel, Google Sheets, Salesforce, so on and so forth. And the challenge is that before she can build this report, she has to do multiple things. She has to first collect the data from different sources, she has to bring it together, then she has to run these different things like merging, removing duplicates, removing manual errors even before the data is ready. And that's not where the journey stops. When the data is ready, she actually needs to learn, understand, and analyze it to be able to build an effective story for that report. So Meera is very visibly nervous. But what happens if all of this grunt work that she needs to do actually came together in an automatic, seamless process so that she could spend more time on the storytelling and the understanding aspect of data? That is the power of a good data lifecycle. The data lifecycle is a process where different stages of the data journey come together to help us with the eventual use case, which is acting with data. We have first stage planning. What is it that we want to collect? Then we have the collection and the consolidation of data, like Meera, who needs to collect data from different tools. Then we have the storage of data, storage of important data that is governed and compliant. Then we have the transformation, the merging, the duplication removal, etc. Then we have the analysis and the visualization, which most of us are actually really excited by. And finally, there's the acting with data, which is Meera identifying what trends to send in the funder report, which will make a compelling story. And unlike what a lot of us may think, this is not actually a linear process. It's very much cyclical, where depending on what story I want to tell with my data, I'll actually zoom back and come back to the collection stage or the planning stage of what is it that I need to plan for. So the next time we have any kind of a misconception about what the different data stages entail in any kind of a nonprofit, we don't say, hey, we're just collecting and we are visualizing. There are different aspects that takes different teams to come together to actually meet the one goal of acting with data. Now, all of this is fine. But the question we're all asking today is that in this data journey, in these different stages, where does AI play a role? So across nonprofits, we've seen that depending on who you are, what role you play, how you interact with data on a day-to-day basis, you're asking different questions about the implementation of AI. Someone might be asking, okay, AI seems interesting and there are different possibilities, but Do the risk outweigh the benefits? If you're a program lead like Meera or an M&E lead, you might be asking, okay, I want to use data, but my data foundations are messy. If I actually input messy data into an LLM, will it actually output the right analysis? The common fabric between all of these questions is actually the fact that how is it that we can leverage data and AI towards effective decision making? So that's the focus of the session today, and that's what we're going to talk about. There are going to be three things largely. First, we'll start with examples on the applications of AI that we've seen happen across different nonprofits. It would be grounded in real life evidence. Then, as Dalgo, we'll talk about what are some of the things we've done to enable AI usage very safely and securely across different stages, such as analysis, things that we are piloting. Then, of course, we'll talk about the governance layer, which is a very hot topic in light of DPDP and other compliance related conversations. And finally, we'll close with an offering that we've curated for the participants today, which is a pro bono data discovery session with our consulting team. So, before I hand over to Anusha, I just want to trigger a quick poll and ask the audience how they are feeling about AI today. Give me a minute, and that should be up on your screen. You should be able to see it now. Okay, I see that the room is less skeptical, very high on optimism. That's great to learn. Most people are saying curious, which is great because you signed up for the webinar. That's a nice signal. We're also seeing a little bit of excitement. That's nice. Awesome. I'll just share the poll, put up the results in front of you so that you can also understand what the common sentiment is. And with that, I'll just hand over to Anusha.
Everyone, I'm going to be sharing my screen now. Let me know once you can see it.
Yeah, we can
Right.
see it.
So thanks, Stuti, for just giving us a quick primer on what we discussed in our last session, which was the data lifecycle discussion. Today, we're going to go through, as Stuti mentioned in the previous part, on how we're going to go about this entire process, right? So what's the evidence? What have we tried out internally? What are things that you need to keep in mind before you implement AI in your organizations? And what is the next step that you can start thinking about if you're considering implementing some sort of an AI tool or an AI process into your data lifecycle as well? So we're going to start with the evidence. And before that, I'm just going to show an overview slide. There might be some concepts here that a lot of you might already be familiar with on the types of automations that you could potentially do at different stages of your data lifecycle. Just for example, if you wanted help with drafting out indicators or identifying what kind of like output areas or outcome areas you need to measure according to what your program goals are, that's like a quick way in which you can kind of try to like quantify or put it down in terms of numbers and see what it is that you're trying to measure. So that's something that an LLM could potentially help you with. Another big use case is in voice recognition and image recognition. So there's OCR and voice capture. Again, a very this isn't used that well, but it is starting to get a lot more efficient and cost effective, especially if you're trying to do surveys in locations where literacy might be an issue, or you're not able to get out digital devices in place, so you can't send out offline tools that people can fill out. Having voice capture as a way for you to get information is a great way to do it. And transcription is now becoming a lot more efficient and a lot more accurate. So that's like another way where AI can come into play. In storage and transformation, this is a little more in depth, especially if you have a very comprehensive data system. How can you go about documentation? How do you maintain metadata and storage of all of the definitions of different indicators that you might be capturing? That's like a good way for you to have all of this information stored in a schema document. Transformation, this is like a huge place in which AI could play a role, that is in terms of cleaning and preparing your data. So you might have a lot of raw information that's coming from your different survey tools and sources. So how do you make it in a way that can be consumed easily or used for further analysis? That's another place in which we might be talking about data today. And of course, there's also analysis and visualization and how we can actually make decisions with the data itself, which is another exciting part of it that we're going to be talking about today. One thing that we wanted to highlight, like while we're going to go through actual case examples as to how we've seen organizations work with AI, one thing we also want to highlight is this requires some prerequisites, right? So for you to have something that's for you to be able to analyze or visualize your data, it does need to be reliable and trustworthy and clean in the backend so that you're able to do this sort of a process. So how do we kind of help you get to that point where you can start using these tools? It's also not, another thing that we want to make sure is that this entire process is not going to be completely AI itself. We do want humans to be in the loop during all of these processes. So what are those small areas or small gaps in which we think that AI can serve as a tool for you to make things a little more efficient? And where is it that you might have to build those skills or build those internal capacity to bridge that gap for you to be able to use AI better? So this is something that we're going to be talking about today. We know we have a very diverse audience, but I am going to speak about a few topics that might be a little more in the nitty gritties and a little more technical. So bear with me and feel free to ask questions at the end of this discussion. With that said, I'm going to start with one of our first case examples. So this is on data planning to collection. So one of the things that we've been hearing from NGOs is how LLMs can be used a lot to kind of prompt or help generating forms and things like that. But one thing that was quite interesting and one thing I wanted to kind of speak to everyone about in today's webinar was about the tool called MCP, right? So Model Context Protocol. So this is an interesting tool where this is a way in which AI can actually communicate with other tools. So this is information that it's using in order for it to actually execute tasks on other existing tools. And a very useful way in which you could use it is potentially in Kobo Toolbox. I'm going to show you a quick demo of how that can be done. But before that, I just want to get a sense of how many of you currently use Kobo Toolbox in your workflows? How many of you are familiar with ODK? Just type it in the chat or just put a thumbs up just so I can get a sense of how many people know the tool. All right, we have someone from CreateNet. Do we have a lot of people? I can't really see reactions.
Yeah, we have Waste Warriors or Jish saying they use Survey CTO,
CTO?
Manisha. Yeah.
Great, okay. Got it. So ODK is essentially the open data framework on which Kobo Toolbox works. So it's actually a way in which you code in all of your questions and forms. So the idea is that a tool like Kobo Toolbox is typically used in surveys because it has a lot of conditional logic and conditional skip conditions that you can incorporate before you receive responses. And a lot of M&E practitioners might be very familiar with using this tool just because of the dynamism in which you can create questions, right? So if you're sending out a survey that can be used by multiple people on the field, but you want very specific answers. So you're implementing a program, but there's a different set of questions that you need to ask a specific demographic like men versus a different set of questions you might need to ask women. Kobo Toolbox actually, and even ODK as a framework, allows you to put those logics into the questionnaire itself so that it skips it and only asks certain bits of questions. So it makes it very dynamic as a tool. And it also has certain frameworks that can make you create that tool and can be used offline. There's a lot of capabilities that it offers, and it's very flexible, which makes it used by a lot of NGOs, which is quite clear from all of the raised hands and the thumbs up and the chat responses that we've had today. One thing that this might be new to a few of you, but one thing that a lot of people struggle with Kobo is this form, right? So if you want to think about something that has so many conditional logic frameworks and labeling, there is of course a UI in which you can create Kobo questions, but in most cases, if you want to build something that's really complex, which is what the case is in a lot of baseline assessments, this is something that you have to fill out. And this is just a subset of what it might look like. You have specific groups, you need to put a set of questions in one page. Within that, you can put if conditions. And then within that, you might have a list of data validation options, right? Like you can select which state do you belong to, which district do you belong to, which age group do you belong to. And based on those specific conditions, you'll have another list of questions populated as well, which is not a very easy process. Just validating this Excel form that it is based on, or even like putting it on the UI, is quite time consuming. So there is a lot of time and effort that goes into this. So one of the things I was playing around with was to figure out whether we can use an MCP. And ODK does have an MCP, which can help you immediately kind of prototype questionnaires quickly. And this is what I wanted to do. So one of the things that M&E practitioners might be doing at the moment is just kind of using an LLM to get the code out of them or generate like an Excel sheet. But how is this? How is it? How can we do this in a way that's quicker and that is a lot more accurate? And MCPs contain the information that tells AI how to use that specific tool and how the code is usually structured so that the output that comes at the end of the process is a lot more reliable. So I'm going to show a quick video of what I did with the Kobo ODK MCP. So I'm just asking it to create an ODK form. It's going to take a couple of minutes to do that. I'm just generating a sample form. So it's just going to like just go through the process. I'm asking it to put in a couple of skip logic questions. I haven't really shared a framework, but that's something that you can share. And it's just doing its thing. I'm just accepting those things, and it's created this very neat Excel form with a list of questions, which I've asked it to generate a random form just for the purpose of just demoing it to all of you for a school monitoring visit sort of questionnaire. So we'll just have a quick look at what this looks like in just a moment. So usually the Excel forms would look something like what I shared in the previous slide, right? It's a list of questions with like the logic pre-coded in. And what we would do is go to Kobo Toolbox and upload that Excel form as a new form submission here. So here is what we're doing, where we're uploading this form. We're saying that it's part of this specific project and it's applicable to this country, and we're creating the project. And this entire process of just creating this form with all of the logic baked in, just so you can pilot it and see how quickly you can get to a form that otherwise might have taken a couple of hours, is what I wanted to show through the power of MCPs itself. So this form is currently deployed, and if you can open it, you can actually see that it's done pretty quickly. And based on your specific requirements, you can use the same MCP to kind of set your list of indicators that you want to target. Just a very quick overview of the type of questions that you want to put in. And the power of this is that it's able to code it in with less effort and less like looking very deeply into what kind of conditional, like it's a lot of effort for an M&E practitioner to spend time in writing that code. And that's basically what this has the information for it to automate and make it easier for you to prototype survey forms very quickly. So this is just one example that we wanted to show. And following this, I wanted to also share with you all an example of something that was done in our AI cohort, which is a Project Tech for Dev initiative where NGOs got to prototype and try out different AI use case, pick a specific AI use case and try to implement it in their organization. So one of the things that is quite similar to what the exercise that I showed you with Kobo was with Acom Foundation and Avni. So Acom Foundation works with women and children in to provide public health for them. And for this, like a caseworker would normally need a case management tool so that they can see how a beneficiary, because they have multiple forms for just a single beneficiary, they would typically want to see what are different results that's coming from that specific beneficiary. So they can't have different forms from which they can get different bits of information. They need to be on top of things. So one way to do this is using a case management tool. But the disadvantages of using a case management tool is it's heavily complex, right? There's so many forms that you need to be targeting. There's so many interplays of components between each other, and multiple forms might be adhering to a single program, which means that just coming up with like a clear, comprehensive document as to what exactly needs to be built out can take a really long time, which is understandable. And I think that happens a lot in organizations as well. And I'm sure some of you might have faced this sort of an issue. What the AI cohort tested out was trying to structure a lot of the conversations that they had into a specification document that actually told them this is what we need, this is the kind of surveys that need to be built out, and this is the sort of intermingling and complexities between these two surveys, between all of these surveys, so the 32 forms, right? So this was like the sort of relationships that each of these would have to each other have with each other, and we want to build something out. So using this sort of a flow where they were able to pull all of that information from unstructured data into a specification document and put that into the app made this process happen really fast. And this was using AI itself. So basically what I'm trying to say is that the idea of using MCPs and also using ways to structure requirements in a way can help in building out, move from planning to collecting relatively fast. So you can pilot fast and you can try to build in all of these tools and rules into all of the frameworks that you're trying to test out. So this is a couple of ways in which you can use AI in your planning and collection processes. We'll move on to transformation and data analysis. This is based on a recent project that we did with Digital Green. So Digital Green, actually, this is an interesting use case, which is also kind of highlighting why it's useful for us to also have lesser reliance on AI in places where we can afford not to do so, right? So in Digital Green, they were actually going through millions and millions of farmers' data, which needed to be classified into different keywords just to figure out what is information that the farmers need using their farmer chat app. So the way in which they wanted to do it, since they do not want very granular levels of information, what they wanted to get out of it is just overall themes of information. But if you want to implement an AI process on millions and millions of rows of data, it's going to turn out to be very expensive. So, but they already know there are certain keywords that are expected and certain ways in which this information can be extracted. And there might be a lot of messages or questions coming out which might not be relevant to, from a research practitioner's perspective, might not be relevant to them at all. So one way in which they were thinking of optimizing this process is going with a hybrid approach, right? So let's think of it as, let's try putting a rule-based framework for them to extract certain keywords and themes out of it. And for messages where that cannot be done is where we can rely on AI itself, because that has more unstructured terms, things that they might not expect, and they would prefer having an LLM, which does really well in classifying information and language-based data in a very quick and simple way. So that's kind of the framework in which we came up with this entire process. And the idea is, how do we make sure that we're only using AI for the things that it's capable of doing well at, and also using it in a way that's more cost effective. Also, another quick example of how it can be used for data analysis and transformation. Cleaning can be done without using AI, but we can use more deterministic methods in doing it. The other thing that I also wanted to talk about was a way in which AI can be used for analysis and actioning. Analysis and actioning, if you remember from the data lifecycle, is kind of the final part of the process, right? So we analyze the data and then we use it to make decisions so that it can actually help real beneficiaries in real time. So that's something that was done again in the AI cohort with the Avanti Fellows team, where so in this case they were trying to teachers, trainers were trying to help students have better outcomes in their studies, and for this they needed to collate multiple bits of information when they were having calls, mentorship calls with these students. So the information that they wanted to link together is historical test data, the current chapter syllabus, what is required for their entrance exams, what's the expected scores for them, and as well as previous notes and meetings that they've had with the specific student. So that's a lot of information for one person to remember and handle to be able to give very targeted guidance and advice. So the framework that they used here is kind of to collate all of this information together for specific students and get the key takeaways for them. So this was like the overall process that was used, and they were able to get like quick summaries on what are key places in which the students struggle, where are areas of improvement. And also the idea was not to let the AI, it's important for us to not let the AI actually guide on what kind of things that the student needs to do, because there needs to be a little bit of the teacher's guidance involved here as well. So a very objective summary of notes based on the student's performance itself, aligned with what the results need to be, is something that this summary was able to do. And an interesting way, because we don't see this very often, that AI directly helps the beneficiary. It's normally part of the process that leads to the beneficiary's outcomes eventually. This is a way in which this did help the beneficiary, because it was able to guide the teachers in giving better guidance to the students themselves. So that was basically, this is all the information that was collated together. And the answer that they got was something very simple. So this entire process was essentially automated for all of the mentors and practitioners to help the students out. All right, so I've given quite a bit of examples. I've not covered all of the parts of the data lifecycle, But that's not the point of the exercise. The point of the exercise is just to help you all understand what it is that you can do with AI, what it is that you can't do, what are some prerequisites that you need to have at the ready before you can use AI. And also wanted to share a couple of learnings that we've seen from our experience working with NGOs, right? So one important thing that's come out of all of this is that it's able to automate certain parts of the data lifecycle, right? But there are still portions of it that's not completely automated. Like there's no standardized solution for everybody to just plug and play and implement into it. It's very tool based. It's based on what every organization needs. And it probably can only automate specific parts of it as well. So it's not going to automate the entire collection process. It might just automate, making it easy for you to build out a tool that can help with data collection itself. Similarly, for analysis, it is still necessary for you to have data stored in a systematic way, prepared in a systematic way for you to be able to analyze it. So there are certain portions which is not completely automated, but those are things that as part of Dalgo, we're also thinking about how we can make this easier for organizations to navigate it. Another thing that came out of this process is just understanding that hybrid solutions work very well, right? Because in some cases, AI does a good job in being able to classify information, but in some cases, we might want to rely on rule-based methods, things that we know works, things that's established that we know is trustworthy and reliable. Because in some cases, AI still hallucinates. There are still issues with the way that it generates summaries, and we don't want to completely rely on it as the entire part of the process. The third thing is, as I mentioned, it's not, if you see in a lot of cases, it's not the final solution. It's not the thing that's reaching the beneficiary directly. There is still a little bit of intervention involved and before it reaches the beneficiary directly. So that's still a kind of work in progress. So it's just helping downstream, it helps smoothen out things, but it's not a direct outcome. So those are still things that we need to think about. And of course, the final thing, which I'm hoping to also have impressed on a lot of you today, is that AI is just beyond chatting with AI itself, and this education might be more important because there is ways for you to use model context protocols and agents and tools and integrations with AI to get a lot more out of it because you can automate certain processes completely without just relying on chat-based interactions. Um, yeah, so this is just part of our evidence. Um, I want to just shift over to what this means for us, right? So this is something that we've learned through interactions with NGOs and how they work with data and AI. So something that we do as part of Dalgo Consulting is provide this sort of guidance in how you can help use AI as part of your day-to-day processes. And part of it is also to understand how you're currently working with your data. So we have a couple of packages here on data discovery, advisory, capacity building, readiness, helping with M&E, data strategy, which can all help with the entire data life cycle itself. And we also have this discovery session, which is what we're extending as part of this webinar. So for organizations that are here right now, you are free to kind of like fill in a form. I'll share a QR code in the next slide. You can fill in that form and we'll schedule a session with you, which is completely free, just to understand where you are at, what are some gaps that you need help filled, what are quick things that you can do. So just an open discussion that you can have with us to just learn more about what you can do with data and AI, a little more about the session if you have any follow-up questions as well. Just an open discussion basically. And yes, you can scan this to sign up for a data discovery session. I will stay on this slide for a couple of minutes and we'll move on to the next session, which is on our experiments with AI.
Anusha, while we wait on this slide, I just asked in the chat what folks think are their biggest challenges when using AI with their data. And Nemes has commented saying that they're curious about how to make changes in the raw data, especially when you um, have link to the data collection tool. Nemes, do you want to unmute and ask that question. Let me just allow participants to unmute themselves.
Hello, Anusha. Uh, Hope you can hear me well.
Yes.
So I think my concern was when you have when you had connected the or using the AI, you have already doing the connection using LMLS. Then it may happen you are using like a Kobo or you are using a Savestio and you have linked the data directly to your source where the automation is done, and then you want to do some kind of changes. It may be life changes. You want to do for example, you get like a concern, like for example, you're doing a training or you are doing some kind of activity, but you are collecting either the right data, like for example, attendance, and then participant has decided to say that we want to change this kind of information, and remember, you have already connected the data. You have linked it to somewhere. And at the end, you have set a visualization page where you see the submissions and whatever. So how can we leverage AI? Because it needs some kind of a quick changing, a quick update, so as the team can have an updated data. That was my concern.
Got it. I think I understand your question. Maybe I'll just repeat it. Is this about changing the form itself or about changing a specific a row or an observation where the data needs to be updated and it's not the correct data that's captured?
It may be changing a data point in general or adding some kind of
Hmm.
new column, on the forms or whatever.
Right. Yeah. So one thing that we've seen is very useful. So for example, if it's I'll just share just one example, maybe a use case where I've seen this being useful is in Kobo, there is like a way in which, so for example, if you have a drop down list, right, and you have a list of regions that you need to pick from, there is a way in which you can just upload a separate CSV or an Excel sheet or point it to a sheet which has the entire list corresponding to those codes that you want entered. So if you want to expand that drop down list and if you want to add new region names or like any sort of data categories to it, that's something that Kobo allows you to do. So you can kind of update the form in terms of the form possible responses on a live basis. That's one change that can be done. The second thing is if you realize downstream that there are changes or issues with the raw data that needs to be uploaded, one thing to do definitely is downstream. So, for example, one of the things that we do in Dalgo is that we create data validation checks, right? So when you ingest data into your data warehouse from whichever source it is, and I'll go into a little more depth on what we do as part of Dalgo. So it allows you to ingest data live. So when the data is getting updated live onto the warehouse, we can set up certain transformation rules or tests that we can keep in place, quality checks that we can keep in place, which will point out if there is something that is not fitting within the values that you had initially put in. And we can surface out which rows of data that is. So if there is a person who has control over the Kobo forms or the raw data, they can actually go back and change that specific observation, because I do think Kobo allows for the admin to be able to change responses if it's required, if it's wrong, if it's not actually validated within what you need. That is another way in which you can go about it. The third way, of course, is in setting data validation rules within Kobo itself. So you can ensure that the form responses do not diverge a lot from what is required. So if it's a numerical value and if the accepted values are only between 0 and 100, for example, those are rules also that you can set within the ODK framework, allows you to put that sort of rule as well. So those are a couple of ways in which it can be done. If it's downstream and if you don't want to touch the raw data directly, you can, in the transformation stage where you're actually working with cleaning out the data, those changes can be made there as well. So, for example, if there's hundreds of categories that you have and you want to condense it to just 4 or 5 categories, and you don't want to change the raw data as source, that's something that you can create rule-based transformations at a later stage as well, where you can condense those. Those are just a couple of ways in which you can work with kind of like modifying or adjusting or transforming the data itself. I hope that answers your question, but happy to kind of have a separate call as well to go into a little more depth if that's what you'd like. Cool. Um, I see a
Yeah.
question from Vishwanath and Tatiana as well. I'll move on to the next section because I think that also might be useful because we'll be covering governance a little more in the next sections. Um, so maybe I'll move there and naturally can also move towards answering both of your questions. All right. Um, I'm going to very quickly talk through a couple of experiments that we've been trying out at Dalgo, and we also have a couple of our engineers on the call who can like go through what we've been doing a little more in detail. But before that, for people who are new to the product itself, a quick refresher on what Dalgo does. So, apart from us offering data consulting and working with NGOs to provide data solutions, we also have a platform, which is a data integration, dashboarding, like a holistic data management platform. So we can connect data from over 600 different data sources through Airbyte. We can pull it into a data warehouse that is owned by you. And this data can be live and refreshed on a regular basis so that you have access to managed live data from whichever sources that you collected from. It also allows you to link these different data sources, right? If you want to merge information and consolidate information from across beneficiaries that are coming from two different forms, that's something that you can do within the platform itself using transformations and analytics that's built into it. We also have cleaning and transformation that happens, which is run on a regular schedule. And we also allow you to build out dashboards and charts. So this data can actually be, you can look at it, you can action on it, you can share this information, also allow you to create reports where you can add comments, put summaries, so you can actually interact with data and share it with a wider audience as well. Also generate alerts. So for example, if you see that values are not supposed to be in a certain way, it sends out an alert for you to come and check why things are not happening in the right way. So that's also something that the platform does. The platform is allows you to have your own warehouse, so you hold ownership of your own data. We're also aligned with DPDP. It's an open source platform, and yeah, you're free to kind of plug in any other additional tools that you want as well. If you want to use alternate tools for data visualizations, that's something that you can do. If you want to bring a different type of warehouse, that's something that you can do. So that's something also about the platform itself. That's just in brief about Dalgo. So what we've been doing with Dalgo, which I didn't cover in the previous section. So we did not really look at how AI can be used for visualization and reporting and analytics. So that's something that we'll cover as part of what we've been experimenting with the platform. Just one caveat here, this is a work in progress. So this is not something that's live or accessible to people. This is just something that we've been testing out. We're very conscious of the fact that the data that we're using we shouldn't have access to any sort of PII information. We should just be looking at aggregate data, only allow AI access to the columns and the type of tables that we wanted to have access to and not access to everything at a granular level. So this is just a very indicative sort of picture of how we're thinking about making it easier for organizations to get to a dashboard quickly, right? So before I go into this test that we had, one thing I wanted to share was that, so one thing that we've come across a lot is that the data sometimes already exists. It's clean, it's raw, but it stays in the warehouses, and getting it to a stage where it's like a managed metric, a dashboard, can take a little bit of time. And in some cases, we might want immediate results just to see what it looks like, just as a starting point or a prototype for us to see what it is that we can do with that data, right? What kind of insight can we get out of it immediately? So we're thinking of a couple of options. One was, of course, chatting with the data. Comes with its own constraints, again, on the security part, which is, again, something that we're very conscious about. The other thing is, how do we make it easy for us to interact and visualize with it? Because we don't want to keep asking follow-up questions. And the idea behind having a dashboard is that you have all of the metrics that you want to monitor easy and ready for you to use. So one of the things that we are trying out is with using MCPs. So there's a prototype of a model context protocol, which allows us to kind of use either Claude or GPT for us to interact with the tool directly and allow us to ask AI to be able to build out these dashboards for us by taking metadata and context from what's the data storage holes based on the documentation that exists on the data itself. So this is just it's a 6-minute long video, but I'm going to go a little fast across it just to tell you what I'm doing with it. So basically, I am connecting the tool, the AI tool, to my Dalgo account. And I'm going to ask it a couple of questions on how many dashboards currently exist. Can you tell me if there's a list of tables that exist where, what kind of metrics can I use to analyze information from a specific state of a specific project? And this is just sample data on that. So it's just giving me a list of, it's going to give me a list of metrics that I can calculate using the sample data set that I've populated for it. And then I'm going to ask it to just pull whatever information or charts can be created and put it into bar graphs, drill down tables, pie charts, and put it into tabs in a dashboard. So what it's actually doing is it's running those respective tools associated with the requests that I've made using the documentation that's available to it through the MCP. And it's asking me additional follow-up questions. Who's going to be able to use the dashboard? From whose perspective is it? Which state do you want it to be built on? And then it's applying the specific conditions. And again, I'm just going to run through it. It's just giving me a progress update of all of the tabs that are being created. And at the end of it, I hope everyone can see what's happening. It's just created a dashboard here. So this is the one that was just created by the MCP tool. And that's what this looks like. So it has all of those graphs that I've asked it to populate, organized by theme. Obviously, this is just a prototype for us to just see what it's capable of doing. The idea is that I'm not going to let it make this much of the decisions. We should specify exactly what we need, what kind of tables it needs to pull from. Since the documentation was something that we'd already created for all of these tables, it was able to recognize that information and populate this. So it's easy for us to kind of consume and use directly. So since that documentation exists, since it was able to get context with the limited requests that I asked, it was able to populate something like this. Another thing that we can also do with this, of course, is there are MCPs also for Google Slides and PPTs. So it's capable of having those skills which can build out decks. So it can, if we provide access to the specific dashboards through the MCPs, it can read what's there on the dashboard in terms of aggregates, obviously, and also generate just a quick executive summary that we can then iterate on and use whatever we want to use. Again, just a prototype, not like a complete recommendation that we need to be using MCPs to be building out our reports for us, but just the idea that this is something that you can prototype and test out and use at least like an initial version of what you might want to share at a high level. All right. Before I move on and get more questions, something that's very important that we want to cover as well, which is on governance. So we spoke a little bit about this before, but I do want to kind of make this very clear, which is that when we're thinking about using AI for any of our tools, two things that we need to have in mind is guardrails. That is, what does this have access to? This is going to have access to any PII? Is it going to have access to any sensitive information? Those are things that we definitely need to keep in mind. So we don't just feed all of our tables to an AI for it to analyze and synthesize. We give it access to maybe metadata, and we can decide this, right? So it gives it access to specific tables or columns within specific tables and not access to all of our data. Things that we need to think about when we're implementing processes like this. The second thing is evaluations, which is that if we're asking questions to AI and asking it to build out charts and metrics for us, we also need to tell it what is it that's expected results out of it, right? Because it can't just be generating things that is completely false and unreliable, in which case we can't use that information reliably from the AI that's coming from us. So it's important to also have an evaluation framework. One way to go about this is to just start with setting up a golden rules, right? A golden data set and saying that this is for these questions, these are the answers that we would expect to be generated from it. So that kind of builds out the initial sort of reference rules for AI to be able to follow. And this can also be transferred for us to understand what's the best possible tool for us to use for that specific process. So we can actually compare information from different types of models before we actually decide on what it is that we want to use reliably, that people can trust and use. So these are two things that we need to think about as well as AI becomes a little more mainstream and organizations start to use it more. Definitely things that are very, very important that we need to keep in mind before we use it safely and with confidence. All right. And this is, of course, something that's a work in progress. We can help you figure this out as well through separate conversations. And yes, with that, want to end with the question on which stage would you like to trial AI on first? Can we put this poll out, Stuti?
Yeah, I'll just put it up on the screen. Folks should be able to see it now.
Oh, wow. A lot of responses coming in on the interest on analysis and visualization. Not much on storage. I understand maybe we didn't go into a lot of depth about it, but there is merit there as well. Wait another couple of seconds.
Yeah, we've got a significant number.
All right. I can you share the results? I'm not sure if I'm able to share it.
I can do it. It'll be up on the screen.
Yeah. So a lot of interest in using it in visualization, which is interesting. Very few for transformation, um, and some for planning and consolidation as well. Nice. It's great to hear that there's a lot of interest in figuring out how you can use these tools better. Um, Before I close, I will also share one more slide for us on what the process for this would be, right? So, how do we start with working towards using AI tools in our process? First, understanding which stage it is that you'd want to use AI and if there's actually a real use case for you there. Think a little about like the governance concerns there. Are you giving it access to all of your data? What is information? What's the least possible information that you can share with the AI for you to ensure that you still have security and control over the information that you're providing to it? And how you can start small, right? Like what are quick fixes or gaps or significant things where you spend a lot of time in the organization that you can start with through smaller automations. And how it can benefit your program. So thinking about the end beneficiaries, another thing that we'll think about when we're trying to think of an AI solution, not just using it for the sake of using it, but also thinking about how it's going to benefit as a whole. All right. Yes, I'm leaving the data discovery QR scanner again and open to any questions from the group. We have another 8 minutes left.
Yeah, we have a bunch of questions. Thanks for the session, Anusha. We can start taking them one by one. Before we
Right.
begin, I'll just request everyone to engage with the session survey poll that would be up on your screen right about now. We'd love to know what you liked about the session, what you didn't, and what you would like to speak us about. We do these webinars monthly, so the more you tell us what you're interested in, the more we can bring those topics to you. With that, let's also look at some of the questions in the chat. There was a question about governance. Tatiana was talking about documentation and governance being a challenge. Hope Anusha's section on governance answered it for you. We have another question from Vishwanath. where he's asking, can we use AI to automate report creation in the sense that it picks data from Excel sheets, and that you can substitute with values, modify the sentence accordingly. Vishwanath, if you are on, you can just unmute yourself and ask the question. I know that a couple of folks have already responded to you in the chat.
Yeah, thanks. There was already a couple of responses. Yeah, so what I wanted to know was like we I mean this is true for probably all NGOs that we have to give reports to funders at short notice, and most of our data is saved in some kinds of tables. I mean, either spreadsheets or in our case, we also have it in BigQuery and those kind of data frames. So, and we already kind of know what are the key metrics that we would like to showcase. So if we have like a standardized template of a report, and then whenever we ask it to update, it just fills in those values where it needs to be. And then I mean, like, there would need to be some kind of a script so that, like, for example, if we are saying that the impact was greater this year compared to last year, then accordingly it should change the words so that it's less than, more than, or so much percentage greater than, those kinds of things. Is this possible?
Yes, I'm maybe I can just address a little bit of it, and if there's anyone else in the team who wants to take it over as well. So one way to do it, definitely, because this is rule based, where it's based on the value that you can determine how the information is represented. There you can maybe, if you're using Google Sheets and you're using slides, app scripts can help you substitute information and put text on slides just by embedding content from graphs and charts and tables as well. So that's one way in which I'm like, I can quickly think of how you can go about it. I think back in the day we used to use Excel-based macros to update uh, uh, specific information on PPTs and things like that. So that's one quick way. So you can kind of use AI to build those codes out for you to refresh it on a regular basis. The obvious answer would definitely be just to build out a dashboard and build out a report based on the dashboard so that the data is refreshed and you're able to have drill downs incorporated. So it's just a live working framework where you can put some annotations in, but you also get to see what the charts and visualizations look like in terms of trends, so people can come up with their own conclusions on data trends as well. That's something that we do in Dalgo currently with the Dalgo reports. You can actually add comments on, you can extract information. Basically, you can share a dashboard in terms of a report, which can be generated as a PDF. And you can also go to that report and add comments and annotations currently in the tool. So that allows you to have a live conversation on what's happened in the last quarter. And this can be generated quarter on quarter or month on month or however you want it. So those are two different ways in which we can go about that process. I'm not sure. I hope the first one answers your question a bit more. I think it's more on like having specific formats already set up on maybe a PPT or a Word doc.
Yeah, thanks Roy.
Okay. I think Pradeep's also answered something on reporting based on dashboards. Cool. There's a question from Shruti on qualitative analysis to tag and give themes all at one place. Shruti, could you explain a little more about this? Is this just simple theme extraction that you're thinking about, or is this something more specific?
Hi. Because we work in the education sector, there are a lot of times where we collect qualitative data through FGDs, focus group discussions, or semi-structured interviews. So when we collect a lot of data, thousands of entries are there, and my main question is, does it give access to highlight the themes that are coming up in the data, or if, for example, if I want to know how much parents are involved in their child's education, can I just type parental involvement, and can I get the data all at one place? Such kind of analysis is what I was talking about.
Okay. Might have to understand this a little bit more. So, probably from a perspective of whether if you already have a preset list of themes that you want information classified on, that's
Hmm.
something that we can put it in terms of a code, and we can codify it and say that this is the type of theme that you extracted. that you
Okay.
need extracted and how you want it represented. If it's a live query that you want to do, that's something that we'll have to think about a little more, because that might require like a different way in which you're interacting with it. But I'm sure it's definitely something that we can get using it, right? So a quick search based on keywords, and then it's able to
Yes.
populate the frequency of it. I think that should be something that we can do. We can discuss this a little more in depth, because I don't know if I'm oversimplifying your question also.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Pratiksha's joined with me, Anusha. So maybe with her experience, she wanted to share something
Oh yeah,
on
please
Shruti's
go ahead,
question.
Pratiksha.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. Pratiksha is another data engineer in our team who has a lot of experience working with AI.
Okay.
I cannot hear you, Pratiksha, you're speaking.
Can you hear me clearly now?
Yes.
Hello?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So this is actually a feature, what you've described exactly almost, that we're working on building out for Dalgo. But one of the problems that we've run into from bringing it into, what we've built out into production is that we haven't actually been able to find a partner organization to work with us on testing this feature out in real use cases, seeing if it's able to do what organizations require for us to be able to bring it into Dalgo as a fully productionized end-to-end feature that's very accessible to use without organizations having to sit down and do any custom scripting. Right? So if
Right.
you're amenable to it, should be considering you have a use case. What we can maybe do is reach out to you, show you some of our demos, get your thoughts on them, on the way we're trying to productionize it.
Yeah, sure, definitely.
Okay, great. So we'll reach out to you on that. But yes, qualitative analysis is definitely something that's coming to Dalgo soon. We just
Okay.
need some interaction and feedback loops with organizations like yours to be able to bring it out in the best possible form.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Pratiksha. That was helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Rizwan has a question on what are the guardrails that AI will have, since we have a lot of PII data. I'm wondering if Pradeep is on this call. Do we have Pradeep?
I think Pradeep might not be anymore.
Okay, that's fine. So maybe I can cover this, but one of the things that we are thinking about is how we can restrict access, right? So in terms of how we're looking at it in Dalgo, we have access to the data warehouse from which information will be, like you run SQL codes or codes that will be able to summarize information from all of these tables. So a couple of ways in which we can do this is, one, give it access only to the metadata. That is, say that if you want to get information on a certain, let's say you want aggregate information on a specific state, you want to know how many beneficiaries are in the state, all it will have access to is a table that has just the metadata, right? It has a list of all of the columns, all of the names of the tables, and the definitions of each of these columns. So as long as the AI has this information, it will be able to generate the code that queries the data warehouse directly and only gets a summarized list of results for that specific data set. So that's one way in which it doesn't expose PII data. Another way to do this is to only provide access to specific rows or columns. So it just does not let the AI query anything that's in tables that it does not have access to, or query anything in columns that it will not have access to. So that's a couple of ways in which you can do it. But also this depends heavily based on the use case. Are you using it specifically for analysis or querying, or are you using, this would be the case even if you're just doing simple visualizations, right? Like if you don't want even like an external tool to have access to a lot of this row level information, that's probably something that you don't want to expose externally outside of your organization itself. So those are a couple of things to consider. It's not, would not be restricted to just AI itself.
Yeah, but also speaking just generally, given the fact that Dalgo is DPDP compliant, and when we work with your data, we don't store anything. We are a processor, an intermediary, a cleaner, a visualizer, but none of the storage happens on our end. So we don't really have access to do anything with your data that you have not given us permission to do, including storing and exporting it. So throughout the entire process of using the platform, the data never leaves your ecosystem. which also means that there's less risk surface.
Right.
We're
And
at time,
yeah.
so we can take one last question. And folks, if you're interested in any having any follow-up discussions or questions, we've dropped the form link over email, and you can also reach out to us on an email that I'll put up in the chat. I think we've addressed all questions. Great, we're good to close now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. I hope this was useful to all of you.